අයිබෝවන් සුබ උදෑසනක් ගරුතර මහා සංඝරත්නය ඇතුළු සම්භාවනීය අමුත්තන් සියලු දෙනාගෙන්ම අවසරයි. 2021 වසර ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ උසස් අධ්‍යාපනයේ සමාජීය විද්‍යා සහ මානව ශාස්ත්‍ර ඉගැන්වීමේ සියවස් සංවත්සරය සනිටුහන් කරනවා. ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ උසස් අධ්‍යාපනයේ සමාජීය විද්‍යා හා මානව ශාස්ත්‍ර ඉගැන්වීමේ සමාරම්භය 1921 වසරේදී සිදු වූයේ ලංකා විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයේ සමාරම්භයත් සමඟ. මෙම 1921 වසරේ සිට 2021 වසර දක්වා සියවසක් පුරා විවිධ අභියෝගයන්ට මුහුණ දෙමින් විවිධ ගැටලු අභියෝග ජය ගනිමින් අඛණ්ඩව පැමිණි ගමන් මාර්ගය දෙස නැවත හැරී බලන්නටත් 21 වන සියවසේදී ලංකාවේ උසස් අධ්‍යාපනයේ මානව ශාස්ත්‍ර හා සමාජීය විද්‍යා ක්ෂේත්‍රය මුහුණ දෙන අභියෝග පිළිබඳව නැවත සලකා බලන්නටත් මේ මනා අවස්ථාව උදා කරගත්තේ විශ්වවිද්‍යාල ප්‍රතිපාදන කොමිසම් සභාව විසින්. ඉතින් ලාංකේය ජනතාවට ශාස්ත්‍රාලෝකය ලබා දෙමින් ශ්‍රී ලාංකේය ජාතියේ ජීවිතාලෝකය දල්වන්නට මනුෂ්‍යත්වයෙන් සහ දයාවෙන් මෙන්ම තාර්කික ජීවිතාවබෝධයෙන් යුත් ජනතාවගේ ජීවිත ආලෝකවත් කරන්නට සියවසක් පුරා මානව ශාස්ත්‍ර හා සමාජීය විද්‍යා අධ්‍යාපනයේ ආලෝකවත් ගමන් මඟ දකින්නටයි අප දැන් සැරසෙන්නේ.
மதிப்புக்குரிய தேரல் மற்றும் கணவான்களே கணவாட்டிகளே அனைவருக்கும் இனிய காலை நேர வணக்கங்கள். 2021 ஆனது இலங்கையில் உயர்கல்வியில் சமூக விஞ்ஞானங்கள் மற்றும் மானுடவியல் துறைசார் கற்பித்தலில் நூற்றாண்டு நிறைவாக அமைகின்றது. இலங்கையில் உயர்கல்வியில் சமூக விஞ்ஞானங்கள் மற்றும் மானுடவியல் கற்பித்தலின் தோற்றமானது 20ஆம் நூற்றாண்டின் ஆரம்பத்தில் இன்று கொழும்பு பல்கலைக்கழகம் என அறியப்படுகின்ற இலங்கை பல்கலைக்கழக கல்லூரி நிறுவப்பட்ட போது ஆரம்பமானது. இலங்கையில் சமூக விஞ்ஞானங்கள் மற்றும் மானுடவியல் கற்கைகளை முதலில் வழங்கிய அரசு நிறுவனம் இலங்கை பல்கலைக்கழக கல்லூரி ஆகும். இந்த வகையிலே பல்கலைக்கழக மானியங்கள் ஆணைக்குழுவானது சமூக விஞ்ஞானங்கள் மற்றும் மானுடவியல் துறையில் இத்திருப்புமுனையை நினைவு கூறுவதற்காக முன்னெடுப்பினை மேற்கொண்டுள்ளது. கணவான்களே கணவாட்டிகளே, இந்த பல்கலைக்கழகங்களில் சமூக விஞ்ஞானங்கள் மற்றும் மானுடவியல் கற்பித்தலின் நூற்றாண்டு நிறைவையொட்டி இங்கு இந்நிகழ்வை அறிமுகப்படுத்தலுடன் இந்நிகழ்வுக்கு நாங்கள் உங்களை அன்புடன் வரவேற்கிறோம்.
Good morning, Venerable Sangha, ladies and gentlemen. The year 2021 marks the centenary anniversary of teaching social sciences and humanities in higher education in Sri Lanka. The origin of teaching social sciences and humanities in higher education in Sri Lanka dates back to the early 20th century when the Ceylon University College was established in January 1921. This Ceylon University College was the first governmental higher education establishment in Sri Lanka to offer courses in social sciences and humanities. In this given context, to celebrate this milestone in the field of social sciences and humanities, University Grants Commission of Sri Lanka has taken the initiative to commemorate this particular turning point of centenary years. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the inauguration of the centenary year celebration of teaching social sciences and humanities in higher education in Sri Lanka. As pointed out by my co-host for the day, we will be now moving on to a documentary film where we will be reflecting on these 100 years. Thank you very much.
University is a unique product of the Middle Ages, having prospered to its current status through centuries. Sri Lanka is not exceptional in this regard. It is clear from the historical chronicles such as the Deepavamsa and the Mahavamsa that the field of education in Sri Lanka has a long history spanning over 2,000 years. The establishment of a higher seat of learning goes back to the 3rd century BC in Anuradhapura. We find references to Buddhist educational institutions in Nalanda, Taxila, and other centers in India in pre-Christian times. In Sri Lanka, learning centers grew up in the major pirivenas or monastic centers. The Mahavihara, the Abhayagiri Vihara, and the Jetavana Vihara can be mentioned as institutions of higher learning that have exemplified the virtues of contemporary academic education. These educational institutions had become educational centers that had gained such a reputation that even foreign students had been attracted to them. In addition, they had served as monastery educational institutions in various parts of Sri Lanka, in which both the laity and the clergy had studied. These monasteries were later renamed as pirivenas. This monastery pirivena education continued after the Anuradhapura period, along with some developments and setbacks. Historical records state that educational institutions such as the Vijayabha Pirivena, the Padmavati Pirivena, and the Sumitra Devi Pirivena, which were established during the Kotte period, were endowed with qualities that should be present at the university level. In time, there grew many centers of learning. All of them were autonomous educational institutions. But from at least the 7th century of the Christian era to about the 15th century, each center belonged to one or the other of a number of scholarly traditions established through key institutions up to the modern era. In parallel to Eastern forms of knowledge production, it is vital to consider the history of Western educational institutions, which goes back to the schools such as Athens in Greece. The historical moment of modernity and enlightenment that influenced the emergence of modern universities coincided with breaking the dogmatic hegemony of the metaphysical sciences and the beginning of the exploration of the great outdoors. Humanities and social sciences in this regard should be understood as disciplines that help differentiate humanity and being human. Humanities and social sciences disciplines enable freeing oneself from his or her sole reliance on experience for their thirst for knowledge. Humanities and social sciences are classified as liberal arts in the Western education. It means freeing man from the strata of injustice, inequality, and subjudicial patterns in which he is imprisoned. Accordingly, they allow one to receive the knowledge that will enable one to think rationally about human destiny. Thus, the humanities and social sciences education must help people unravel those chains and help create the intellectual tools that break them. Free education is a mechanism to bring about equality to an unequal society. And in this regard, universities of a country play a tremendous role. Agitation to establish a university for Ceylon adapted to local needs, which would impart an education and not merely estimate the amount of knowledge possessed by examinees, was led by Sir Ponnambalam Arunachalam, Ananda Kumarasamy, Sir Ponnambalam Ramanathan, Sir James Pierce, Sir Marcus Fernando, Sir D.B. Jayatilaka, and other nationalists through the Ceylon University Association, which was set up in 1906 for this purpose. Scholars like Dr. Ananda Kumarasamy were of the firm belief that an education should allow room for symmetrical cultural study, opening space for multilingual cultures, more specifically bilingual education, deciphering the boundaries of national culture and the barriers to understand general mankind. Governor William Henry Manning, Governor and the Director of Education E.B. Denham, resumed discussions on this in 1917, and in 1919 work commenced on the establishment of the Ceylon University College. Immediately after the war was over in 1920, the government purchased Regina Walauer, which belonged to Arthur de Soysa, a grandson of the philanthropist Sir Charles Henry de Soysa. The building was renamed as College House, which is currently the central administrative building of the University of Colombo, and was the first home of the Ceylon University College. It was officially declared open on the 21st day of January 1921. This marked the beginning of university education in Ceylon. Prior to this, opportunities for higher education in the country were confined to medicine, where a licentiate in medicine and surgery, LMS, was awarded at the Ceylon Medical College, founded in 1870, and law at the Ceylon Law College, founded in 1874. The Ceylon University College was established to prepare Sri Lankan students for the external degree examinations of the University of London, and therefore it did not enjoy a Sri Lankan identity. Once again, the pro-education elites in the country had to give up the London lamp at University College and strive to light a lamp for graduate education in Sri Lanka. Accordingly, in 1942, Sri Lanka was awarded the University of Ceylon, whose first Vice-Chancellor was Sir Ivo Jennings. Since then, Sri Lankan universities have expanded gradually and steadily over the last 100 years. Centenary celebrations. University education in humanities and social sciences in Sri Lanka, 1921 to 2021. In 1870, the University of Colombo began its pioneering role in higher education with the establishment of the Colombo Medical College. And in 1921, the Ceylon University College began with 115 students and was affiliated to the University of London. It remained the only tertiary level institution of higher education in the country from 1921 to 1942. Its inauguration by His Excellency Governor General Manning was at the iconic building known as College House, where later in 1942, the first University of Ceylon, an amalgam of the Colombo Medical College and Ceylon University College, was established, with Sir Ivo Jennings as its first Vice-Chancellor. College House is therefore perhaps the oldest surviving university building, which has been in continuous use since 1921 as a symbol of higher education in Sri Lanka. The university now has 9 faculties with 56 academic departments, a campus, a school, 6 institutes, and 5 centers. Over the past century, the 2 mainstay faculties of arts and science dedicated to the humanities and social sciences and natural and life sciences respectively have blossomed into vibrant learning environments. With the establishment of the University of Ceylon in 1942, the British Empire granted a European-style university to Sri Lanka. The University of Peradeniya was initially established as the University of Ceylon in 1942, which was housed in Colombo. However, the fully fledged university was officially opened in 1954 in the presence of Queen Elizabeth II by Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. The University of Ceylon became the first unitary, residential and autonomous university in Sri Lanka. At present, the University of Peradeniya hosts 9 faculties, 3 postgraduate institutes, 10 centers, 73 departments, and teaches about 12,000 students. Vidyodaya Pirivena was established in 1873 by the most venerable Hikkaduwa Sri Sumangala Thero at Vidyodaya Pirivena at Maligakanda to oppose the expansion of missionary education in the country and to promote declining languages, including Dharma Vinaya. This monastic college was converted to a modern university as the University of Sri Jayawardenepura in 1959. The origin of the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences dates back to the founding of the Vidyodaya Pirivena. Even though it was initially established as the Faculty of Arts, it was later renamed the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences in 2011. It is composed of two broader streams of disciplines of humanities and social sciences. The faculty offers degree programs in over 30 fields of study. The Vidyalankara Pirivena was established in 1875 by Venerable Sri Dhammaloka Thero of Ratnamana. The Vidyalankara University, the predecessor of the University of Kashmir, has 7 faculties and 55 departments, including 12 departments of the Faculty of Social Sciences. The Faculty of Humanities is a fine blend of East and West, in that it includes traditional disciplines, thus reflecting multilinguistic and multicultural approaches to the study of culture and civilization. The University of Moratuwa is considered one of the finest technological universities in Sri Lanka, attracting the best students and producing world-class graduates. Originally established as a technical education institute in Maradana in 1893, it took residence at Kattabadda in 1959. With 6 faculties, Faculty of Architecture, Faculty of Engineering, Faculty of Information Technology, Faculty of Business, Faculty of Medicine, and Faculty of Graduate Studies, it is the most sought-after university for undergraduate and postgraduate enrollment in the respective engineering and technological disciplines, with a blend of courses related to humanities and social sciences. Through its research units, centers of excellence and consultancy services, the university provides expert advice to the government and private sector in various fields. The establishment of a fully fledged university in Jaffna had been a long-standing aspiration of the people of Jaffna. This was fulfilled when a campus of the University of Sri Lanka was established with the proposed faculties of Science, Law, Humanities, and a Department of Physical Education in 1974. Jaffna campus became an independent and autonomous university with the name the University of Jaffna, with effect from January 1st, 1979. Faculty of Arts, which is unique in its traditional and cultural background, is one of the largest faculties, comprising 17 departments with 27 study disciplines. The University of Runa, established in 1978 and elevated to a fully fledged university in 1984, is Sri Lanka's 6th oldest university. It is the only university in the country's southern region, with 10 faculties spread across 3 prominent locations. The new building complex for the university was designed under the direction of the world-renowned architect Jeffrey Bauer. The Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences comprises 9 academic departments. Being the largest faculty, the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences has been able to attract a large number of students from all the provinces of Sri Lanka. The Open University of Sri Lanka was set up in 1978 for the purpose of providing higher educational opportunities to a heterogeneous clientele, providing them an unconventional route to higher education irrespective of their status in life, such as age, occupational status, gender, ethnicity, and religion. Being the only university to offer programs through the open and distance learning methodologies, the Open University holds a distinct place within the national university system. The main campus is in Inauguration in the district of Colombo, with 8 regional centers scattered all over the country. It consists of 6 faculties and a postgraduate institute, in addition to several specialized divisions. Establishing and developing a higher education institution in the Eastern Province has long been a hope of the Tamil intellectuals in that province. As a result of the recommendations received from the commission appointed by the UGC, the University College of Batiklo was established in 1981 with 2 faculties, Science and Agriculture, affiliated to the University of Peradeniya. In 1986, it became a fully fledged university as the Eastern University Sri Lanka. At present, it has 6 faculties, a campus, Trincomalee campus, and an institute, Swami Vipulananda Institute of Aesthetic Studies. The history of the systematic education in Sabaragamu province dates back to the times of King Parambahu II of the Dhammadanya period, under whose patronage the Deva Patiraja Pirigana, a 13th century monastic university, was established in the Palabadala area of the Ratnapura district. The Sabaragamu University of Sri Lanka now stands as the present-day link to such glorious tradition of knowledge and wisdom, which is the 12th National University in Sri Lanka. Rajarata University of Sri Lanka, located in the historic city of Mihintale, was established on 31st of January 1996 as the 11th National University in Sri Lanka. At the inception, 4 faculties were established, and in the year 2006, another faculty was added. The faculties of Social Sciences and Humanities, Faculty of Management Studies, and Faculty of Applied Sciences are conveniently located in the Mihintale premises, while the faculties of Agriculture and Medicine and Allied Sciences are situated in Pulyankulama and Salyapura, respectively. The Southern Eastern University College of Sri Lanka was established to the displaced students and academic staff from the Eastern University. This university college was ceremonially inaugurated with a batch of 33 students belonging to the 1992-1993 academic year who had already completed their first year of studies at the Eastern University. However, the government decided to confer it the status of a fully fledged national university under the name of Southeastern University of Sri Lanka. It thus commenced its activities as a fully fledged university from 15th May 1996 with 2 faculties at Adelaide, Chennai. Presently, the university is operating in Uluville with 6 faculties. Only this university is gifted with the Faculty of Islamic Studies and Arabic Language. The Wayamba-affiliated University College of Sri Lanka was established in 1991. In the beginning, students had the opportunity to study home science and nutrition and agricultural studies. Till the year 1995, this institute was maintained as an affiliated campus of the Rajarata University. However, in 1999, this campus was transformed into a fully fledged university called Wayamba University, which at present has 6 faculties. In response to a demand for setting up a university in the Uva province, the Uva Valasa University of Sri Lanka was established in 2005 in Bandula. The Uva Valasa University of Sri Lanka was established with a clear vision, highlighting the theme of value addition to the national resource base. All the degree programs are multidisciplinary and focused on entrepreneurial education. The Uva Valasa University aims to produce graduates with entrepreneurial skills in a variety of areas and professions. The degree programs cover resource areas such as aquatic resources, export agriculture, tea, palm, latex, minerals, tourism, hospitality and events management, IT, entrepreneurship, management, science and technology. 4 faculties are offering 15 undergraduate programs. University of the Visual and Performing Arts is specializing in art, design, fashion, music, dance and drama and related performing arts. It was formerly known as the Government College of Fine Arts, Hayward Institute of Art and the Institute of Aesthetic Studies of the University of Ceylon. The origin of the University of Visual and Performing Arts can be traced back to 1893, the era in which the Ceylon Technical College was established. Approximately 5 decades later, on 1st October 1949, the restructuring of the university system in Sri Lanka affiliated the institute to the University of Kalmar in 1980. However, it received the independent university status on 1st July 2005. The Gampa Vikramarachchi University of Indigenous Medicine was established by Ayurveda Chakravarti Pandit G.P. Vikramarachchi in 1929 as the Gampa Siddha Ayurveda Vidyalaya as a center of learning of Siddha Ayurveda tradition of medicine. By recognizing the emerging trends in Ayurveda medicine and its tremendous contribution to the national health sector, the Vidyalaya was declared as a state-recognized institute in 1951. In 1995, it was incorporated as Gampa Vikramarachchi Ayurveda Vidyalaya under the Ministry of Indigenous Medicine. It was uplifted to the state of a university in 2021. In 1991, the Northern Province Affiliated University College was established in Vavuniya to offer courses in mathematical sciences, accountancy and finance, and it was upgraded to the Vavuniya campus of the University of Jaffna in 1997. In 2020, the Faculty of Technological Studies was also established. All 3 faculties offer 12 degree programs of 3 and 4-year duration at present. The Vavuniya campus of the University of Jaffna has been elevated to a separate state university and established as the University of Vavuniya on 8 June 2021. Accordingly, the University of Vavuniya became the 17th state university in Sri Lanka, with effect from 1st August 2021. Sri Pali campus, the only campus of the University of Colombo, produces graduates in the disciplines of mass media and performing arts. It has been a center for many schools of arts, crafts and sciences, and a center for aesthetic studies for some centuries. The academic programs of Sri Pali campus are shaped by the ideological and visionary inspirations of the late Dr. Rabindranath Tagore, the founding father of the Shanti Niketan. Further, the present academic and physical development of the Sri Pali campus was greatly influenced by the Japanese Reverend Dr. Junji Sui, who came to Sri Lanka on the invitation of the founder of Sri Pali campus, late Wilmot A. Pereira. The campus has 2 faculties and 4 departments. In its formative years, the Trincomalee campus functioned as an affiliated university college, operating under the umbrella of affiliated colleges. It offered 2 diplomas, one under the supervision of the University of Sri Jayawardenepura and the other under the supervision of the Eastern University Sri Lanka. When the affiliated university college system was abolished, Trincomalee Affiliated University College found itself vested with the Eastern University, and the 2-degree programs were initially conducted under 2 different faculties of the Eastern University. This college got its identity as Trincomalee Campus of the Eastern University Sri Lanka in 2001 with provision for 2 faculties. The National Centre for Advanced Studies in Humanities and Social Sciences was established in 2005 to enhance higher education in the fields of humanities and social sciences. NCAS provides training, research, academic advice and support services, including scholarship programs that facilitate training in local or foreign higher education institutions, leading towards postgraduate, postdoctoral and other qualifications. It promotes advanced thinking and creative originality by motivating and rewarding academics in that direction. All the 17 universities and 2 campuses in the country come under the purview of the University Grants Commission. The primary role of the UGC is to plan and coordinate university education, allocate funds to higher education institutions, maintain academic standards, regulate higher education, and regulate the admission of students to higher education institutions. On the occasion of the 100th anniversary of establishing the social sciences and humanities disciplines in Sri Lankan university education, the University Grants Commission is also making an important contribution to the creation of academic discourse on the values of humanities and social sciences, including law, management, education, library sciences, and visual and performing arts. The high cultural values and thinking reflected in our modern life were created by the influence of humanities and social sciences knowledge systems. The ideas of goodness, justice, and freedom were instilled in people by the artists, the philosophers, and the new thinkers. It is through humanities and social sciences disciplines that these values are socialized. Hence, these disciplines are still alive and well, with a profound but positive effect on all sections of society. We definitely need scientific discoveries, vaccines, and treatments. But a world devoid of psychology, history, poetry, philosophy, and law would imprison mankind within the narrow confines of its own rationality. Therefore, it is not only timely, but also crucial to celebrate this historic milestone as a nation, as 1921 marked the humble beginning of the current higher education system in the country, and 2021 marking its centenary with a unique focus on humanities and social sciences education. Centenary celebrations. University education in humanities and social sciences in Sri Lanka, 1921 to 2021.
සියවසක් පුරා ලාංකේය උසස් අධ්‍යාපනයේ පවත නොහොත් ආලෝකයේ පවතයි අප ඒ දුටුවේ. ඉතින් මතක් කරන්නට අවශ්‍යයි මේ මොහොතේදී මෙහි රැඳී සිටින සම්භාවනීය අමුත්තන් සියලු දෙනා සේම www.hssugc.ac.lk වෙබ් අඩවිය මගිනුත් මේ මොහොතේදී බොහෝ දෙනා මේ උළෙල මේ සමාරම්භක උත්සවය සජීවීව නරඹනවා. ඉතින් සම්භාවනීය අමුත්තනි අප මේ මොහොතේදී සැරසෙන්නේ මේ සභාව ආලෝකවත් කරන්නට චිරාගත පොල්තෙල් පහන දල්වමින් ඒ සඳහා සම්භාවනීය අමුත්තන්ට ඇරියුම් කිරීමේ කාර්යයට මම ඇරියුම් කරනවා මගේ සහෝදර නිවේදිකා දෙපළට.
கண்களை கவரும் வகையில் அழகிய ஆவணப்படத்தை தந்துதவிய இலங்கை ஸ்ரீபாலி பல்கலைக்கழகத்தினருக்கு எமது நன்றிகளை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறோம். அத்துடன் நிகழ்வழி மூலமாக www.ugc.ac.lk மூலமாக இணைந்துள்ளவர்களுக்கும் எமது வணக்கத்தை தெரிவித்துக் கொண்டு இன்றைய நிகழ்வுகளை ஆரம்பிப்பதற்காக மங்கள விளக்கினை ஏற்றி வைப்பதற்கு பின்வரும் அதிதிகளை நாங்கள் மேடைக்கு அழைக்கிறோம். நன்றி.
Ladies and gentlemen, the documentary which you just witnessed shows the reflection of the past 100 years of teaching social sciences and humanities in higher education in Sri Lanka. We would also like to recognize the efforts put by Sripali campus under the guidance of the Standing Committee, Humanities and Social Sciences of University Grants Commission to putting up this particular documentary. And apart from the dignitaries who have joined physically with us today, we would also like to recognize the dignitaries and the viewers who are joining with us right now via www.hss.ugc.ac.lk. This is what we call in adapting to the times of pandemic. With this, to start off today's proceedings, we would now like to invite the following dignitaries to light the traditional oil lamp. Honorable Minister of Education, Honorable Dinesh Gunawardena, the Secretary of the Ministry of Education, Professor Kapila Pereira, Chairman of the University Grants Commission, Senior Professor Sampath Amaratunga, Vice Chairman of the University Grants Commission, Senior Professor Chandana Udavatta, Chairman of the Standing Committee on Humanities and Social Sciences, Senior Professor Premakumara De Silva. We would also like to kindly invite all the Vice Chancellors who have joined with us today to join the lighting of the oil lamp. Also, we would like to invite Dr. Priyantha Premakumara, Secretary of University Grants Commission, Senior Professor Vasanthi Arsaratnam, Commission Member, University Grants Commission, and also coordinators of this event, Dr. Asha Fernando and Professor Vimal Hevamanage.
මීළඟට අප යොමු වන්නේ තවත් සුවිශේෂී අවස්ථාවකට. අද දිනේදී මේ සියලු කටයුතු මෙලෙසින් සිදුවන්නට ඔබ ඉදිරියේ මේ සමාරම්භක උළෙල මෙන්ම අද දිනේත් හෙට දිනේත් පැවැත්වෙන ශාස්ත්‍රීය වටිනාකමකින් යුත් බොහෝ කාර්යයන් මේ ආකාරයෙන් සිදුවන්නට මඟ පෙන් වූ සුවිශේෂී පුද්ගලයෙකුටයි අපේ ඇරයුම දැන් මේ සභාව අමතන්නට. විශ්වවිද්‍යාල ප්‍රතිපාදන කොමිෂන් සභාවේ මානව ශාස්ත්‍ර සහ සමාජීය විද්‍යා ස්ථාවර කමිටුවේ සභාපති ජ්‍යෙෂ්ඨ මහාචාර්ය ප්‍රේමකුමාර ද සිල්වා මැතිතුමනි, ඔබතුමටයි මේ අපේ ගෞරවනීය ඇරයුම. අද දිනේදී මේ සභාවට සපමින සිටින සියලු දෙනාත් අතත්්‍ය අවකාශයේ අප සමග සම්බන්ධ වන සියලු දෙනාත් අමතර ලෙසට
மங்கள விளக்கினை ஏற்றி சென்ற அனைவருக்கும் எமது நன்றிகள். இந்நிகழ்வு நிலையியற் குழு தலைவர் சிரேஷ்ட பேராசிரியர் பிரேமகுமார் டி சில்வா தலைமையிலான பல்கலைக்கழக மானியங்கள் ஆணைக்குழுவின் சமூக விஞ்ஞானங்கள் மற்றும் மானிடவியல் நிலையியற் குழுவின் நீண்ட கால அர்ப்பணிப்பு மற்றும் கடின உழைப்பின் மூலமும் ஏற்பட்டதாகும். அந்த வகையில் போற்றத்தக்க தலைமைத்துவமும் மற்றும் ஒருங்கிணைப்பின் விளைவாக இலங்கையில் சமூக விஞ்ஞானங்கள் மற்றும் மானிடவியல் உயர்கல்வி நூற்றாண்டு விழாவை முன்னிட்டு வரலாற்று தொகுதி, ஆய்வு அறிக்கைகள் மற்றும் நூற்றாண்டு ஆவணப்படம், மாநாட்டு நடவடிக்கைகள் ஆகியவற்றின் வெளியீட்டை நாம் இன்று காண உள்ளோம். எனவே இந்த கௌரவமிக்க கூட்டத்தை உத்தியோகபூர்வமாக வரவேற்கும் வகையில் இந்த அழைப்பிதழ் சமூக விஞ்ஞானங்கள் மற்றும் மானிடவியலுக்கான நிலைக்குழு தலைவர் சிரேஷ்ட பேராசிரியர் பிரேமகுமார டி சில்வா அவர்களுக்கு செல்கின்றது.
Thank you, Dilani. This event is a result of a long-term commitment and hard work of the Standing Committee of Humanities and Social Sciences of the University Grants Commission, Sri Lanka, which is led by the Standing Committee Chair, Senior Professor Premakumara De Silva. As a result of the commendable leadership and coordination, today we will be witnessing the launching of the history volume, survey reports, and the conference proceedings dedicated to the centenary year celebration of humanities and social sciences higher education in Sri Lanka. Hence, to welcome this prestigious gathering officially, this invitation goes out to the chairman of the Standing Committee on Humanities and Social Sciences, Senior Professor Premakumara De Silva.
Aibohan, good morning. Venerable Mahasangha and religious dignitaries, His Excellency the President, Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Minister and MPs, Chairman UGC, Vice Chairman, members of the Commission, Chancellors, Vice Chancellors, Rectors, Directors of Institute, members of the Standing Committee on Humanities and Social Science and other related committees, emeritus professors, academics and non-academic staff of our university, officials of UGC and the Education Ministry, keynote speaker, secretaries, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed great pleasure for me to welcome you for the inauguration ceremony of the centenary celebration of humanities and social science education in Sri Lankan University, organized by the Standing Committee on Humanities and Social Science of the University Grant Commission. As we are aware, Sri Lanka has long history of establishing educational institutions, particularly Pirivan and monastic education since Anuradhapura period. However, the Western forms of education system was introduced to the country under the colonial period, particularly British. In the 1912, the MacLeod Committee appointed by the Governor Macklem recommended that the University College to be established in Colombo, but there was no immediate progress due to the advent of World War I. Immediately after the World War I, in 1920, the government purchased Regina Walauer, which belongs to the Arthur de Soisa, grandson of philanthropist Sir Charles St. de Soisa. The building was renamed as a college house, which is currently the central administrative building of the University of Colombo, and was the first home to Ceylon University College, which was officially opened the 21st of January 1921. The University College was established to prepare Sri Lankan students for all the for the external degree examination of the University of London. It ceased to exist 1942 when it was transformed into University of Ceylon. The humble beginning of the present higher education system of the country was initiated in 1921, and it has reached its 100th years in 2021. Hence, there is a good reason to celebrate this historical milestone as a nation. Over the years, these universities have been producing large number of graduates, administrators, leaders, scholars, international renowned academics in the field of humanities and social sciences. A serious critical reflection on the path that we have traveled over the last 100 years would be certainly help us to plan for the next 100 years. In general, the humanities and social sciences, traditionally known as liberal arts, are academic disciplines that examine human society and behavior, as well as culture and social constructs. Humanities and social sciences are a very broad field of studies. While the humanities focuses on the human condition, social sciences are more related to human behavior. In other words, the humanities and social sciences have a historical and contemporary focus from personal to global context and consider challenges for the future. The humanities and social sciences encompasses an understanding of the human experience and the relationship between among individual and group within a society. One of the major differences between the two is that humanities involve a more critical and analytical approach, whereas social science deal with more of a scientific approach. By the late 19th century, compartmentalization of the academic disciplines, first as a natural and the humanities and social science, and then within each one of them had already been accomplished. The separation of the natural and social sciences themselves and the both form philosophy is one of the consequences of a historical process of disciplinary specialization. The separation of science from philosophy is mostly reflected in the institutionalization of knowledge production through universities and other higher education institutions. Those institutions became the center of scientific knowledge production in the field of humanities and social science, within which European traditions of Sri Lankan university was instrumentalized. This colonial university structure continues till the establishment of the University of Ceylon in 1942, later the establishment of new universities with the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, new subjects such as archaeology, Buddhism and religious studies, economics, political science, sociology and anthropology, international relations, demography, and modern languages were introduced. By now, almost all the 17 universities established under the previous purview of the UGC offer humanities and social sciences related degree programs and courses while setting up separate faculties, institutes, and departments, including areas such as law, commerce and management, fine arts, education, and library sciences. Broadly speaking, out of 110 faculties in state universities, 34 are related to humanities and social sciences. As per the university statistics published by the UGC 2020, there are 6,525 permanent academic staff in state universities, and among them, 2,510 academics, that is almost around 40%, are attached to the humanities and social science and management faculties. As far as student enrollment is concerned, there were 54,411 students enrolled into the field of humanities and social science, including management and commerce, education, law. And this is about 49.6% of total intake of 109,660. The 2019 and 2020 intakes alone absorbed 18,849 students into the broader category of humanities and social science and it is out of the total intake 41,669, which is about 45%. As far as external degree programs enrollment figures are concerned, a higher percentage, about 74%, is accommodated in the arts stream, apart from the second highest figures shown in the field of commerce and management. About 57% of the total postgraduate enrollment of 35,250 are in these areas of study, with 618 foreign students mainly come from, I want to mention that, Buddhist studies. The latest UGC statistics shows that humanities and social sciences education still the dominant field of university education in the country, though some argue about the drastic cut down of arts education in our universities. It is evident that over the years, humanities and social sciences education in our universities has been expanded. Hence, there is something to be celebrated about the journey that we have traveled over the last 100 years. As in any historical analysis, it is reasonable to say that one should not only focus on achievements, but also on setbacks. Some have begun to actually raise several pertinent questions, such as the quality assurance of student programs and the quality of our graduates, the relevance of the subject within the social sciences, and most importantly, the employability prospects of these graduates, etc. There are very serious questions which cannot be ignored. And the greatest challenge would be on addressing those questions while stock taking to produce quality graduates who fit into the 21st century. It is a very good opportunity for us, the University Grant Commission, and the members of the Standing Committee of Humanities and Social Science to critically look into our past, present, and the future directions of these areas of the study while celebrating its 100th year. As the chairman of the Standing Committee, I am so happy to see the amount of support and encouragement given by the members of the committee to organize a series of events to celebrate the centenary year as a national event under the UGC. I mostly personally mention Emeritus Professor K.N.O. Dharmadasa, who prepared the initial concept note and show a keen interest in the celebration as the senior member of the committee. I am so pleased to see that as a team, we have executed that concept quite successfully within the support of the chairman of the UGC and other members and all the vice chancellors, rectors, directors, and the members of the standing committee, not just to celebrate, but to encourage the university community to commit themselves to reform this very important body of knowledge, humanities and social science, to meet the current needs of the world, particularly needs of the country. With that note, on behalf of the Humanities and Social Science Standing Committee of the UGC and the whole team behind this effort, it's give my great pleasure to welcome you all to the historic meeting. We are greatly honored by His Excellency the Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the President of Sri Lanka, who has so kindly agreed to grace this opening ceremony and send us a congratulatory note. This is a measure of importance of His Excellency, the serious concern which his government feels that is need to ensure the strengthening of university education in the country. Thank you very much, sir. We are very happy that the Honorable Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa is virtually present here today to grace this historical event, and thank you, sir. We pay our humble gratitude to the President and the Prime Minister. We are pleased to have our Honorable Minister Dinesh Gunawardena for accepting our invitation and be with us amidst of your busy schedule. You are very warmly welcome, sir, and we appreciate your guidance and support given to the academic community. We are most appreciative of the presence of chancellors of our universities, including most venerable Dr. Ittapane Dhammalankara Maha Nayaka and other religious dignitaries in this event. Professor Vimal Disanayaka, who expressed his willingness to deliver the keynote address. Sir, this is show your continued interest to disseminate your knowledge for the advancement of education in the country. Thank you very much for kindly accepting our invitation to deliver the keynote speech virtually from Hawaii. The Secretary of Education Ministry, Professor Kapila Pera, who was always there with us and helped us to organize the event. You are also welcome. Chairman UGC Senior Professor Sampath Amaratunga is the key architect behind all our activities. You are very warmly welcome. Vice Chairman Senior Professor Chandana Udavatta, who is always ready to support us. And my fellow commission members, Venerable Professor Kotapiti Rahula, Professor Vasanti Arsaratham, Ananda Javadana, President Councillor Palit Kumar Singh, and Mr. Anuradha Kumar Siri. You all are welcome while thanking for all the support and encouragement given to us. CVCD Chairman and all the Vice Chancellors, Rectors, Directors, you all are warmly welcome and thank you for being with us today and for the amount of encouragement and support extended to the centenary celebration. All the members of the Standing Committee, including deans of all the arts, humanities, and social sciences faculties are very warmly welcome. On behalf of the main organizing committee, I would like to humbly welcome all the emeritus professors, senior professors, and all the academics, administrative and non-academic staff of our universities and institute for the inauguration ceremony of the centenary celebration. I know many of you are connecting with us virtually today. Finally, I would like to welcome all the distinguished invitees and media personnel for the centenary inauguration ceremony and invite you all to participate in tomorrow's virtual conference on humanities and social science education in Sri Lankan universities, issues and changes. I am certain that academic activities that we have lined up to mark the centenary years while helping the effort being made by to find the way forward in the field of humanities and social sciences in the highly challenging and dynamic world that we live in today. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the proceedings. Thank you.
බෙහෙවින්ම ස්තුතියි ජ්‍යෙෂ්ඨ මහාචාර්යතුමනි. උසස් අධ්‍යාපනයෙහි සියවසක් සැමරීම වූ කලී අධ්‍යාපනයට පමණක් අයත් වන අධ්‍යාපනයට පමණක් සුවිශේෂී වන කාර්යභාරයක් නොවේ. රටක උසස් අධ්‍යාපනය වූ කලී රටේ අනාගතය සහ රටේ වර්තමානය පිළිබඳ තීරක සාධකයයි. මෙහි වටිනාකම හොඳින්ම දන්නා නිසාම අද දිනේදී මේ උළෙලට තමන්ගේ සුභාශිංසනය කරන්නට ශ්‍රී ලංකා ප්‍රජාතාන්ත්‍රික සමාජවාදී ජනරජයේ ගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමන්ද ඒ වගේම ගරු අග්‍රාමාත්‍යතුමන්ද කටයුතු කර තිබෙනවා. දැන් අප තිරේ දකින්නේ අතිගරු ජනාධිපති ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ මැතිතුමන් සමගින් ගරු අග්‍රාමාත්‍ය මහින්ද රාජපක්ෂ මැතිතුමන් විසින් එවන ලද සුභාශිංසන පණිවිඩ.
உரையை ஆட்சி சென்ற சிரேஷ்ட பேராசிரியர் பிரேமகுமார டி சில்வா அவர்களுக்கு எமது நன்றிகள். அதனைத் தொடர்ந்து இலங்கை ஜனநாயக சோசலிச குடியரசின் ஜனாதிபதி அதிமேதகு கோட்டாபாய ராஜபக்ஷ மற்றும் இலங்கை ஜனநாயக சோசலிச குடியரசின் கௌரவ பிரதமர் மஹிந்த ராஜபக்ஷ அவர்களிடம் வாழ்த்து செய்தியை செவிமடுப்போம்.
While we thank the senior Professor Premakumara De Silva for his welcome address, we will be now moving towards the best wishes messages from the President of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, His Excellency Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Prime Minister of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, Honorable Mahinda Rajapaksa.
මීළඟට අද දිනේ මෙම උළෙලේ ඉතා සුවිශේෂී අවස්ථාවකට අප එළඹෙනවා. ශ්‍රී ලංකයේ උසස් අධ්‍යාපනයේ සියවස් සැමරුමට සමගාමීව විශ්වවිද්‍යාල ප්‍රතිපාදන කොමිෂන් සභාවේ මානව ශාස්ත්‍ර හා සමාජීය විද්‍යා ස්ථාවර කමිටුව විසින් සකසන ලද මානව ශාස්ත්‍ර අධ්‍යයනය පිළිබඳ වෙළුමත් එමෙන්ම සමාජීය විද්‍යා අධ්‍යයනය පිළිබඳ ග්‍රන්ථ වෙළුමත් සමීක්ෂණ වාර්තාවත් එමෙන්ම සාර සංක්ෂේප සහිත කෘතියත් මේ මොහොතේදී එළිදැක්වීමට අප සූදානම්. පළමුවෙන්ම අප මේ මොහොතේදී එම කෘතිය පිළිගැන්වීම සඳහා ඇරයුම් කරනවා විශ්වවිද්‍යාල ප්‍රතිපාදන කොමිෂන් සභාවේ සභාපති ජ්‍යෙෂ්ඨ මහාචාර්ය සම්පත් අමරතුංග මැතිතුමන්ට ඒ වගේම ස්ථාවර කමිටුවේ සභාපති ජ්‍යෙෂ්ඨ මහාචාර්ය ප්‍රේමකුමාර ද සිල්වා මහතාට එතුමන්ලා දෙදෙනා විසින් මේ කෘති සමූහය පළමු කොටම මහානායක දුරන්දර ආචාර්ය ඉත්තෑපානේ ධම්මාලංකාර හිමිපාණන් වෙත පිරිනැමෙනු ඇති. නමස්කාර පූර්වක උන්වහන්සේ වෙත ගෞරවයෙන් එය පිළිගැන්වූ පසු සෙසු මහා සංඝරත්නය වෙත එම කෘති සමූහය පිළිගැන්වෙන අවස්ථාවයි මේ ඔබ දකින්නේ. අභියෝගාත්මක වර්තමාන කාල සීමාව තුළ ලාංකේය උසස් අධ්‍යාපනයට මඟ පෙන්වමින් මඟ හසුරුවමින් කටයුතු කරන ගරු උසස් අධ්‍යාපන අමාත්‍ය දිනේෂ් ගුණවර්ධන මැතිතුමන්ට අපි ඇරයුම් කරනවා මේ මොහොතේදී වේදිකාවට සම්ප්‍රාප්ත වන හැටියට එතුමාව කැඳවා ගැනීම සඳහා අපි ඇරයුම් කරනවා ස්ථාවර කමිටුවේ සභාපති ජ්‍යෙෂ්ඨ මහාචාර්ය ප්‍රේමකුමාර ද සිල්වා මහතාට. මේ මොහොතේදී අප දකිනවා සුබ මොහොතින් එතුමන් වෙත අදාළ කෘති සමූහය පිළිගැන්වෙන ආකාරය එවගේ අනුරාධ තවත් කටයුත්තක් තිබෙනවා සමරු තිරණයක් එතුමන් වෙත පිරිනමන්න.
Yes, Osunda, we will be now witnessing the handing over the token of appreciation to the Minister of Education, Mr. Dinesh Gunawardena, by the Chairman of Social Sciences and Humanities Subcommittee, Senior Professor Premakumara de Silva.
இலங்கையின் சமூக விஞ்ஞானம் மற்றும் மாணவியல் உயர்கல்வியின் நூற்றாண்டு விழாவிற்காக அர்ப்பணிக்கப்பட்ட வரலாற்று தொகுதி ஆய்வு அறிக்கைகள் மற்றும் மாநாட்டு நடவடிக்கைகளை வெளியிடுவதற்கு நாங்கள் இங்கே கூடியுள்ளோம். அறிமுகப்படுத்தலை தொடர்ந்து மதிப்புக்குரிய தேர்கள் மற்றும் விசேட அதிதிகள், பல்கலைக்கழக உறுப்பினர்கள், வேந்தர்கள் மற்றும் துணைவேந்தர்களுக்கு அன்பளிப்பாக இங்கு புத்தகங்களை வழங்குவதை நாங்கள் காண்கின்றோம். எனவே கீழ்கண்ட உயர் அதிகாரிகளை மிகுந்த மரியாதையுடன் நாங்கள் நினைவுபடுத்திக் கொள்கின்றோம். கௌரவமிகு கல்வி அமைச்சர் தினேஷ் குணவர்த்தன மற்றும் பல்கலைக்கழக மானிய ஆணைக்குழு தலைவர் சிரேஷ்ட பேராசிரியர் சம்பத் அமரதுங்க, மாணவியல் நிலைக்குழு தலைவர் சிரேஷ்ட பேராசிரியர் பிரேமகுமார் டி சில்வா அவர்களுக்கு அனைவருக்கும் நமது நன்றிகள்.
බෙහෙවින් කාර්යබහුල සමයක අද දිනේදී මෙම කටයුතු සඳහා සැපෙමිනි උසස් අධ්‍යාපන අමාත්‍යතුමන්ට අපගේ ගෞරවනීය ස්තුතිය මේ මොහොතේදී පළ කරනවා. හොඳයි. එතුමන්ගේ නික්මයාමින් ඉක්බිතිව අප මේ මොහොතේදී සුදනම් වන්නේ ලාංකේය උසස් අධ්‍යාපනයෙහි ප්‍රමිතිය ලාංකේය උසස් අධ්‍යාපනයෙහි වර්තමානය සහ අනාගතය සම්බන්ධයෙන් නිරන්තරයෙන් අවධානයකින් කටයුතු කරන ලාංකේය උසස් අධ්‍යාපනයේ හදවත බඳු විශ්වවිද්‍යාල ප්‍රතිපාදන කොමිෂන් සභාවේ සභාපති ජ්‍යෙෂ්ඨ මහාචාර්ය සම්පත් අමරතුංග මැතිතුමන්ට මේ සභාව අමතන ලෙස ඇරයුම් කරන්නට.
அடுத்த கட்டமாக பல்கலைக்கழக மானியங்கள் ஆணைக்குழுவின் தலைவர் சிரேஷ்ட பேராசிரியர் சம்பத் அமரதுங்க அவர்களை உரையாற்றுவதற்காக பேருவகையுடன் அழைக்கின்றோம்.
While appreciating Honorable Minister for joining with us today despite his busy schedule, I would now like to invite Senior Professor Sampath Amaratunga, the Chairman of the University Grants Commission, to address the gathering.
Ayubowan, Wanakkam, Assalamu alaikum. Kotte Sri Kalyani Samagri Dharma Maha Sangha Sabhave Ati Pujaniya Mahanayaka Sri Jayawardenapura Vishwavidyalaya Kulapati Acharya Ittapane Dhammalankara Swamindran Wahansa Ehima Anunayaka විශ්වවිද්‍යාල ප්‍රතිපාදන කොමිෂන් සභාවේ සමාජික ජ්‍යෙෂ්ඨ මහාචාර්ය කොටපොළ රාහුල ස්වාමීන්ද්‍රයන් වහන්සේ ඇතුළු අති ගෞරවනීය පූජනීය වන්දනීය මහා සංඝරත්නයන් අවසරයි. Honorable Minister of Education, Honorable Dinesh Gunawardena, Vice Chairman, University Grants Commission, Chairman of the Standing Committee of Humanities and Social Sciences, all other members of the Commission, all VCs, members of the Standing Committee, Secretary UGC, and all other officials from University Grants Commission, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure to share my thoughts on the occasion of the centenary celebration of social sciences and humanities education in Sri Lankan universities, 1921 to 2021. I'm really happy and proud as the Chairman UGC to be part of this endeavor to celebrate this meaningful and significant milestone of our country. No doubt, humanities and social sciences education in the university level, which started with the establishment of Ceylon University College in 1921, has had a clear vision. Yet a reflective inquiry reveals to us that these two disciplines have always helped humanity by providing a broader understanding of the world in which we live today. This is quite apparent in this pandemic period as COVID has become the most serious concern of the world despite of its scientific and technological advancements. Therefore, it is our duty and responsibility to examine what further changes are necessary and what quantitative and qualitative improvements should be introduced to make these two disciplines further beneficial to humankind. Universities, being the centers of excellence in education and research, are the most fitting institutions to undertake this task. And the series of events organized to celebrate this centenary, including this conference, showcase this acknowledgement. Further, this conference provides an excellent venue for academics, researchers, and other stakeholders to share their knowledge and expertise in these two disciplines and find solutions to contemporary global challenges today. It is truly heartening that the legacy of humanities and social sciences education in Sri Lankan universities has been duly acknowledged as witnessed by sending congratulatory notes of many dignitaries, including His Excellency, the President of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, to mark this event. So I thank at this opportunity to express my sincere thanks also and gratitude to His Excellency, the President, Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Honorable Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, Honorable Minister of Education, Mr. Dinesh Gunawardena, and Secretary, of course, even though he is not with us, he helped us in enormous ways. I'm also thankful to the Emeritus Professor Vimal Disanayake, who delivers the keynote address, the Chairperson of the Standing Committee of Humanities and Social Sciences, Senior Professor Premakumara De Silva, for initiating and executing the series of events today. Thank you very much, all VCs and Deans and Standing Committee members coming all the way to BMICH to celebrate this centenary function. Finally, let me congratulate all the paper presenters who will no doubt initiate a wider discovery among universities as well as outside institutions and individuals for the development of social science and humanities in Sri Lanka. Thank you very much.
බෙහෙවින් ස්තුතියි ඔබතුමන් හට. අප මීළඟට යොමු වන්නේ තවත් සුවිශේෂී කටයුත්තකට. මේ මොහොතේදී සභාවෙන් නික්ම යන ගෞරවනීය මහා සංඝරත්නයට අපගේ නමස්කාර පූර්වක ස්තුතිය පළ කරනවා. හොඳයි. දැන් අප ලාංකේය විශ්වවිද්‍යාලවල ගමන් මඟ ගැන කතා කරනකොට අප බොහෝ ශාස්ත්‍රීය සුවිශේෂීත්වයන් පිළිබඳ අවධානය යොමු කළා. අප දැක්කා මීට සුළු මොහොතකට පෙර, අතර මීට ටික වේලාවකට පෙර අප දුටු ඒ සුවිශේෂී වීඩියෝ පටයෙහි වාර්තා චිත්‍රපටයෙහි ලංකාවේ විශ්වවිද්‍යාලවල ගමන් මඟ ගැන බොහෝ දේ එහෙම දන්වලාද? දැන් මේ ශාස්ත්‍රීය අධ්‍යාපනයත් එක්කම ලංකාවේ විශ්වවිද්‍යාල අධ්‍යාපනයේ තියෙන තවත් සුවිශේෂී කාරණයක් තමයි සෞන්දර්යාත්මක සහ කලා අධ්‍යාපනය. ඒ සෞන්දර්ය අධ්‍යාපනය සංකේතවත් කරන්නට මෙන් අද දිනේදී මේ උළෙලට අපි සුවිශේෂී සංස්කෘතිකාංගයක් එක් කරගෙන තිබෙනවා. ඒ ඉදිරිපත් කරන කැලණිය විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයට අපගේ ස්තුතිය පළ කරන අතරේම ඇරියුම් කරනවා ඩිලානි ඔබටත් ඒක නමක් කියන්න.
நன்றி யோஷாந்த். பல்கலைக்கழக மானியங்கள் ஆணைக்குழுவின் தலைவர் சிரேஷ்ட பேராசிரியர் சம்பத் அமரதுங்க அவர்களது உரைக்கு எமது நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்வதுடன் அடுத்த கட்டமாக இலங்கையில் சமூக விஞ்ஞானங்கள் மற்றும் மாணவியல் உயர்கல்வியின் நூற்றாண்டு விழாவில் கலனிக பல்கலைக்கழக இளமானி பட்டதாரிகளால் நிகழ்த்தப்படும் கலாச்சார நிகழ்வினை நாம் இப்போது கண்டு மகிழ்வோம்.
Thank you very much, Osanda and Dilani. While agreeing with both of my co-hosts, so celebrating the wide array of social sciences and humanities, we would be now enjoying a cultural event performed by the undergraduates from the University of California.
තරණය උපතේ සිට මරණය දක්වා කායික මානසික වර්ධනයද මරණයෙන් මතු නැවත එම චක්‍රයේ සමාරම්භයද සංසාර චක්‍රය සංකල්පයෙන් හෙළිදරව් වේ. මෙකී වෙනස් වීම නිර්මාණ වේදියා විසින් දකිනුවේ තරණයක් ලෙසිනි.
එම සංස්කෘතිකාංගය ඉදිරිපත් කළේ කැලණිය විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයේ විද්‍යාර්ථීන්. මිළඟට අප සූදානම් වන්නේ අද දිනේදී මුඛ්‍ය දේශනය සඳහා යොමු වන්නට. ලාංකේය නූතන සාහිත්‍ය, ලාංකේය සිනමාව, ආසියාතික සිනමාව, ආසියාතික සංනිවේදන සිද්ධාන්ත, නව විචාර න්‍යාය විෂයෙහි ඉමහත් කීර්තියක් දේශීය මෙන්ම ජාත්‍යන්තරවද දිනාගත් සුවිශිෂ්ට ශාස්ත්‍රාලීය පෞරුෂයකටයි අද දිනේදී පැවරී තිබෙන්නේ මේ සභාවේ මුඛ්‍ය දේශනය කරන්නට. ඒ සුවිශිෂ්ට ශාස්ත්‍රාලීය පෞරුෂය හඳුන්වා දෙන්නට අපේ ඇරයුම ලැබෙනවා මහාචාර්ය ඕජී දයාරත්න මහතා.
கண்ணை கவரக்கூடிய அழகிய நடனத்தை வழங்கிய மாணவர்களுக்கு நன்றிகள். அதனைத் தொடர்ந்து அமெரிக்காவின் கவாய் பல்கலைக்கழகத்தில் இருந்து பேராசிரியர் விமல் திசாநாயக்க என்று எங்களுடன் இணைந்து கலாச்சார கற்கைகள், சமூக விஞ்ஞானங்கள் மற்றும் மானிடவியல் இணைதல் என்ற தலைப்பில் சிறப்புரை ஆற்றுவது உண்மையில் பெருமைக்குரிய விடயமாகும். அந்த வகையில் பேராசிரியர் திசாநாயக்காவை தனது சிறப்புரைக்கு அழைப்பதற்கு முன் பேராசிரியர் ஓஜி தயாரத்ன அவர்களை இன்றைய முக்கிய பேச்சாளரை அறிமுகப்படுத்துவதற்கு தயவுடன் அழைக்கின்றோம்.
It is indeed an honor for us to have Emeritus Professor Vimal Disanayake joining us today from the University of Hawaii, USA, to give the keynote address under the topic of Cultural Studies when Humanities and Social Sciences Meet. Before inviting Professor Disanayake for his keynote address, it is my pleasure in inviting Professor O.J. Dayaratna to introduce today's keynote speaker.
Venerable Mahasangha, Honorable Chairman UGC, Honorable Vice Chairman UGC, Honorable Chairperson of the Standing Committee, distinguished guests, invitees, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great honor that I introduce Professor Vimal Disanayake, the keynote speaker at this Centenary Conference of Humanities and Social Sciences University Education in Sri Lanka. A veteran poet, a critic, Professor Disanayake obtained his Bachelor of Arts Honours degree from the University of Peradeniya, Master of Arts from the University of Pennsylvania, and Doctor of Philosophy from the University of Cambridge. He was also awarded the Doctor of Philosophy, Doctor of Literature from the University of Kelaniya for his scholarly work. Professor Disanayake served as a Director of Cultural Studies at the University of Hawaii, jointly sponsored by the University of Hawaii and the East-West Center. He has served as an advisor to the UNESCO. He is a recipient of the Fulbright Rockefeller Fellowship and was invited to be the Wei Lung Distinguished Professor at the Chinese University in Hong Kong. One of the leading scholars of Asian cinema and Asian communication theory, Professor Disanayake is the author of over 45 scholarly books in English published by Oxford, Cambridge, Duke, New York State, Minnesota, Indiana, Illinois University Presses, and Routledge. He has also published a large number of scholarly books in Sinhala. Founding editor of East-West Film Journal, he serves an editorial advisor to a large number of prestigious international academic journals dealing with cinema, communication, and cultural theory, as well as International Encyclopedia of Communication. He has won national awards for his books in Sinhala as well as in English, and he was given the prestigious Lifetime Honorary Award of Sahitya Ratna. Professor Disanayake also received Desabandhu Award from the state of Sri Lanka. In this year, Professor Disanayake was awarded the prestigious Asian Communication Award for 2021 by the Asian Media Information and Communication Center in the Philippines on 4th of December. This award is given to the most outstanding communication scholars in Asia who have excelled in their chosen pursuits. This honor was conferred on Professor Disanayake primarily in recognition of his path-breaking work in the domain of Asian theories of communication and Asian cinema. Professor Disanayake is one of the leading bilingual poets He has published 8 volumes of poetry in Sinhala, for which he has been honored with numerous awards. His English poetry has been published in journals such as Hawaii Review, Kaimana, Bamboo Ridge, Cambridge Review, and Pound. His English book of poetry, The Kingfisher, was published very recently. Professor Disanayake was invited to keynote speeches at numerous conferences held in countries and territories such as Germany, Canada, United States, India, Sri Lanka, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. He is currently an affiliate professor at the University of Hawaii and an honorary professor at the Open University of Hong Kong. Professor Disanayake has had the rare distinction of serving both as professor of Sinhala and professor of English. Let me now invite warmly Professor Vimal Disanayake to deliver his keynote address. Thank you very much.
විද්වත් සභාවෙන් අවසරයි. මගේ දේශනේ මා කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වන්නේ ඉංග්‍රීසි භාෂාවෙන්. නමුත් ඊට ප්‍රථමයෙන් එක් වාක්‍යයකින් සාරාංශයක් ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න කැමැති ඒ දේශනේ පිළිබඳව. අද අපි සමරන්නේ මානව ශාස්ත්‍ර හා සමාජ විද්‍යා සංස්ථාපනය කිරීමේ වැදගත්කමයි. එම නිසා මානව ශාස්ත්‍ර හා සමාජ විද්‍යා එක්තැන්වීමෙන් බිහි වූ සංස්කෘතිය අධ්‍යයනය යන නව විෂය පිළිබඳයි මා අද මේ සාකච්ඡා කරන්නේ. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I must thank all of you for deciding to attend this very important educational and cultural event. I must also tender an apology. I was hoping to deliver this lecture in person, and so did the organizers of this event. But unfortunately, the vagaries and the capriciousnesses of the corona epidemic are such that it was not possible at all. I must thank the organizers of this event for asking me to be the keynote speaker, especially Professor Prema Kumara De Silva and Dr. Asha Fernandi. I must also thank Mr. Korlagamage for handling the communication and the technological parts of this endeavor. Now, the topic I've chosen this morning is cultural studies when humanities and social sciences meet. Why did I select this topic? There are 4 main reasons for that. First, we are celebrating the establishment of humanities and social sciences at the tertiary level. And these 100 years ago that happened. So it's a very important milestone in the development of higher education in Sri Lanka. So the topic demands that treatment because humanities and social sciences are so important in the forward march of higher education in our country. The second is that I was, as was mentioned by the previous speaker, I was the director of the Cultural Studies program at the East West Center, Hawaii, for a number of years. And during that period, I organized seminars on a bi-weekly basis that brought very many of the outstanding scholars in the field. And also, annually, I gave a course of lectures at the University of Hawaii to graduate students, that is MA and PhD students, on cultural studies and modern critical theory. So that's the second reason. The third reason is, although there are scholars in Sri Lanka who are interested in cultural studies, it is still to gain the kind of attraction that it deserves. So therefore, I would like to make a case for cultural studies as a worthwhile discipline. And fourthly, I was trained both in the social sciences and the humanities. I was trained as a social scientist at the University of Pennsylvania, and I was trained as a humanist at Cambridge University. In addition, as was mentioned, I published about 40 books in English, and of those, some are in the humanities and some are in social sciences. Therefore, for these 4 reasons, I decided to select the topic cultural studies when humanities and social sciences meet. Now, humanities and social sciences are 2 of the most important modes of inquiry. But the humanities have a longer history. Now, from when we say humanities, we are talking of literature, philosophy, history, and so on, language studies, which have had a very long and distinguished history. But this is not to say that the social sciences are negligible. Although they are of more recent origin, they still have contributed significantly to modern scholarship. So both are important. So we need to understand the relationship between humanities and the social sciences. Normally, there's a tendency to think of social sciences and humanities as antagonistic, as antithetical, which is true so far as it goes. But it is very important to keep in mind the fact that there are certain alliances that could be forged. It's very important to bear in mind the fact that they can be friends. And what we see in the emergence of cultural studies is that humanities and social sciences have come together to create a new discipline. So my point is humanities and social sciences are not necessarily enemies. They can also be friends, and cultural studies proves that. So that becomes important. Okay, so we have on the one hand the social sciences, which are based on natural sciences. It's very important to bear in this mind. When the humanities, social sciences emerged, they were based on natural sciences. In fact, the earlier social scientists were referred to as social physicists, or social science was referred to as social physics. And physics and biology produced earlier models for social science scholars. But in more recent times, there has emerged what is called interpretive social science, which is a mixture of humanities and social science. So on the one hand, you have what is called positivistic social science. On the other, you have interpretive social science. Let me bring out the differences between the two. The positive social sciences can be called, or they valorize objectivism. They are making a case for neutrality, passivity, statistical manipulation, general laws, causality. These are very important factors because they are also what you find in the natural sciences. On the other hand, when you take the interpretive social sciences, they are much more close to the humanities because they are talking in terms of interpretation rather than law, meaning rather than law. And they are talking in terms of text and textual presentations. So therefore, you have the humanities and the social sciences, and recent times, the interpretive social science has emerged. There are a number of scholars who have contributed significantly to this. For instance, if you take an anthropologist like Clifford Geertz, the American anthropologist, he sought to bring anthropology closer to literature. He saw anthropological texts as literary texts. The way you study a literary text is the way you study ethnography. And not only that, in his own writings, he sort of adopted the styles of master stylists like Henry James. So he sought to bring anthropology and literature close to each other. So that is an important aspect. Or you take another anthropologist like Victor Turner, who was talking in terms of rituals and liminality and so on. And he again underlines the importance of interpretive social science. Or if you take another sociologist, Erving Goffman, his whole theory is based on the idea of all the world's a stage and we are all actors, we are play acting all the time. So that allows him a kind of framework with which to analyze modern society. Or if you take a historian, or better still, a meta-historian like Hayden White, what you find is Hayden White making the argument that historical texts are very close to literary texts because normally history is seen as a factual description of what happened in the past. But in modern times, people are arguing against that concept and saying that we need to see history as a form of narrative. There are different narratives of a given past, so that it's a narrativized event, narrativized text that we have. And therefore, what better way of studying narrativized text than making use of literary tools of analysis? So therefore, Hen White brought in ideas of romance, tragedy, comedy, satire, and employment to understand the way that history and literature have come together. So here then you have very interesting situation where you have the positivistic social science still very dominant, playing a very important role, but at the same time you have challenges to it from the interpretive social, which is much closer to the humanities. But there are connections between the two as well, despite the antagonisms. Now, there have been certain supporting forces which encourage this. One is the whole idea of ordinary philosophy promoted by Wittgenstein and J.L. Austin and so on, who valorize the idea of ordinary life and ordinary speech. And that has influenced the interpretive scientists. Thinkers who promote interpretive social science are heavily influenced by Wittgenstein and J.L. Austin and their pupils. Or you have phenomenology, especially thinkers like Merleau-Ponty pointed out the importance of consciousness, the body, subjectivity in understanding the relationship between human beings, nature, and society. That relationship has to be understood in terms of subjectivism. So therefore, the interpretive social science becomes extremely important. Or if you take someone like Charles Taylor, the famous Canadian philosopher, he's talking about human beings as self-interpreting animals. In other words, we are not like a piece of iron or inanimate object. We are self-interpreting animals. So that when we study human beings, we cannot adopt bodily the kind of tools and the methodologies that physicists have adopted in their work. So therefore, there's a very strong case to be made for interpretive social science. So when the interpretive social science was promoted, there were three reactions. One, some embraced it wholeheartedly. They said, this is a wonderful idea, and they embraced it. There were others who totally rejected it, saying that this was superficial, this lacked academic rigor, analytical rigor, and they rejected it. And there was a third group, by far, I think the largest group, which sought to adapt that to meet one's own imperatives and investments and so on, so that it gradually became absorbed by the establishment as well. So that becomes important. Let me just take one example. Let's take the concept of the body. Now, in positivist sociology, the body did not figure very significantly. You had reference to the body, but it was the disembodied agency that was important. Or body was seen as opposed to the soul or the mind. But in interpretive social science, the body becomes extremely important. Merleau-Ponty made a very special argument regarding the centrality of body in human understanding. So the body becomes important. And especially in more recent times, with the work of, say, anthropologists like Mary Douglas or social thinkers like Michel Foucault, the body becomes something that is at the center. It was brought from the margins to the center of intellectual analysis, especially in the case of Foucault. He pointed out that power and the inscription of power on body, the inscription of cultural imperatives on the body are very, very important, and we need to examine that very closely. So you get that the centrality of the body emerging. And when you take giants of social science like Durkheim and Max Weber and so on, they didn't pay much attention to the body. But it's only more recent times, with Foucault and others, that it became important. And it has played a very important role in the resurgence of interpretive social science. Let me just give you an example. In my literary analysis, I sometimes use the concept of biopoetics. By biopoetics, I mean the use of biology, the body, as a way of an aesthetic category, aesthetic mode of analysis. Let me give you one example. Let's take a Sinhala poem from the Salini Sandeshe. Sisivana uvana ingasunga gata haki mitina, nisipulu lukulu ria sakayuru tisaratana, disirana liev ru siriyut epurangana, asipia helena pamanin noveti devangana. Now, in this poem, if you understand Sinhalese, you realize that it is and extolling of female beauty in hyperbolic terms. It's almost equated to divine beauty. But something very interesting happens in the fourth line. There's a kind of self-cancellation, self-diminution going on, because the poet says they are not goddesses because they blink, because the standard belief is that goddesses don't blink, but these women blink, so therefore they are not goddesses. So what's happening in the last line is an act of self-diminution, but also an act of self-enhancement. So that is what you would call it's a very interesting deconstructive move. So you have self-debasement leading to self-enhancement. So this is just one example. I can quote many others to show that biopoetics becomes extremely important. So what happens is you still have the positivistic social science playing a very important role, but you also have the emergence of the interpretive social science with its focus on meaning, values, action, and so on. And you have modes of inquiry, such as symbolic interactionism, ethnomethodology, phenomenological sociology, constructivism, existential psychology, and others, which show the power, the influence of the interpretive social science. So you've got to keep in mind when we talk about the relationship and the alliances between the humanities and the social sciences, here is a very good example of that. Now, things have gone even further because during the last 30 years or so, we have witnessed what can be profitably termed a literary turn in both the humanities and the social sciences. By that, what I mean is that literature and literary theory has begun to influence even disciplines like geography. So that becomes extremely important. So therefore, rise of literary theory, there's a literary turn. Let's take some examples. Let's take anthropology. In anthropology, traditionally, anthropologists went out to remote villages and studied very scientifically. They observed very scientifically, and they wrote their findings in a very scientific manner and so on. And it was seen as social science. But in more recent times, anthropological texts are seen as literary texts. Writing becomes extremely important. It's not only field work, but desk work is as important. The question of writing becomes central to the endeavor of anthropologists. So anthropological texts are seen as literary texts. A good example is Clifford Beers that I referred to earlier. In his work, he sees anthropology texts as literary texts, and he himself is a master stylist, and he follows the example of, say, Henry James and others in composing his sentences. But he brought literature and anthropology together. That's one example. But younger anthropologists have taken that further and established much more closer links between anthropology and literature. So you have anthropology, in anthropology, the rise of literary theory. Or you take another example, history. As I said, history is traditionally understood as an objective account, but now history is seen as a narrative. You can have many narratives of the same past, right? So it's a narrative text. And Hayden White uses literary techniques. He has 4 categories. The categories are romance, tragedy, comedy, and satire. And these are literary categories that he's trying to analyze narrative text. So that becomes extremely important. Or you take philosophy. Now, philosophy has had very little to do with literature in conceptual terms, but in more recent times, thanks to the work of scholars like Richard Rorty and so on, philosophy and literature have come together. For instance, Rorty thinks that there's a very, very close connection between philosophy and literature, and he focuses on writers like George Orwell, Nabokov, and Milan Kundera in his writings to show how significant they are in terms of their philosophical outlook. So philosophy has seen the impact of literature. Or you take geography. Now, geography is one discipline that you would normally associate with literature. But in more recent times, with the rise of human geography and cultural geography, with the work of people like Edward Soja or Derek Gregory, you begin to see that the literary imagination is making important inroads into the territory of geography. And that has made very important changes, transformations in the field of geography. So history and literature have come together. Anthropology and literature have come together. And now you see geography and literature coming together. Let me take one more example. Law. I mean, law is the last discipline that you would associate with literature. But in the new discipline of critical legal studies, you have lawyers, legal scholars arguing that in the construction of narratives that lawyers do, you have to use literary analysis, language, tropes, and so on. So that the critical legal studies also has displaced the impact of literary theory. So the point I'm trying to make is that the literary turn has had a big impact in both the humanities and the social sciences. Now, against this background, I would like to talk about cultural studies, which is the sort of main topic of my discussion this morning. Now, cultural studies is a new field of inquiry. It is interdisciplinary. It draws on a variety of disciplines: sociology, anthropology, history, philosophy, literature, feminist studies, communication studies, media studies, and so on. The strength and the weakness of cultural studies is it's too big. It encapsulates so many different disciplines that it lacks a focus in many ways. But on the other hand, it gives a kind of flexibility that other rigid disciplines do not have. So whatever it is, the interdisciplinarity is one defining feature of cultural studies. Another is that it has a distinct political edge. Cultural studies is nothing if not political. When I say political, I'm not speaking in terms of party politics. I'm speaking in terms of how power is distributed in society. So it has a clear, distinct political edge to it, which is extremely important. Cultural studies, to my mind, is also an interventionist discipline. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is we as scholars, as students of cultural studies, intervene in what we are studying. We are unafraid to take sides, because normally the positivistic sociologists would say you have to be neutral, you can't take sides. But the cultural studies scholars would say, no, you have to take sides. Don't be afraid, because if you are convinced of what you're saying is true and significant and consequential, why not lay down your cards and exactly point out what you want to achieve? So therefore, the intervention is important. Another is cultural studies deals with the everyday life, not some extraordinary things. It sees extraordinary things in ordinary life. Everyday life is very important. And in more recent times, scholars like Michel Lisetto or Pierre Bourdieu and so on have pointed out the importance of everyday life. And cultural studies scholars are constantly underlining the importance of everyday life. Another is that cultural studies deals largely with industrial societies. Anthropology traditionally dealt with rural villages. You know, anthropologists went to remote villages, studied those villages, and brought back the results. But cultural studies scholars are much more interested in industrial society. Although I must say the situation is changing with anthropology. In more recent anthropology, for instance, in a work like Critical Anthropology now by George Marcus, they are studying contemporary society. The places that they work is subject to ethnographic analysis. So therefore, that distinction is not that clear-cut and pronounced. But still, it is industrial society that attracts the attention of cultural studies scholars. Then the pop culture is very important, popular culture. Popular culture has traditionally been ignored by the humanities scholars as well as societies. For instance, literary scholars paid scant attention to popular culture. They studied elite culture, Shakespeare and Thomas Hardy and Dickens, but they didn't study Tarzan. But things have changed very much. And now popular culture has become very important. And there are very many implications of this, the study of popular culture, because traditionally you have elite culture and folk culture, and now you have popular culture, which is not only an economic force, but is a cultural force, but also it gives meaning to life It tells people how to behave and so on. So that popular culture is a very important facet of human existence. And cultural studies people are quick to seize on that. That becomes important. Another is that cultural studies is self-reflective. That is to say, they always question the legitimacy, the efficacy, the validity of what they are doing. They don't pretend to be objective. They are subjective, but they are also questioning, am I on the right path? Is this of some consequence? Is this of some value? They're constantly looking back on themselves introspectively and raising questions that have great self-reflexive value. So that is another important aspect. Then the idea of power and agency. Normally in social sciences and the humanities, we don't study questions of power in that detail. But in cultural studies, it's central, largely due to the influence of Michel Foucault and others. Power is a central concept in human society. Power is not a property that one group has and the other doesn't. According to Foucault and cultural studies scholars, power is rampant in society. It is both positive and negative, so that it's a much more complex notion of power and human agency that you find. And that, I think, is again quite important. Then the relationship between theory and practice. In most disciplines, there's a clear disjunction between theory and practice. But in cultural studies, there's a very clear linkage, connection between theory and practice. Theory informs practice and practice instigates theory. That becomes important. Then the idea of contextuality is again an important factor. Cultural studies is nothing if not contextual. By contextual, what I mean is the objects of study are linked to historical, social, political, cultural events. So the contextuality becomes important. Another is the interplay between the nation and the transnational forces are significant, because cultural studies have to be studied in terms of the nation. It's true. I mean, you cannot get away from that. But you must not restrict the study to the nation alone. You have to go beyond that, because in terms of global finance and so on, the nationalist boundaries are becoming more porous, and you've got to go outside, so that the transnational becomes important. So the cultural studies scholars are trying to balance the nation and the transnational in that sense. Another important point about cultural studies is that it is open-ended. It's evolving. It's not something mute and it's not final. It is constantly evolving, but the statements we make are tentative, provisional. They are partial in both sense of the word. Partial in the sense not full, partial in the sense it is subjective. So that the open-endedness becomes important. Another is the cultural studies scholars speak from the margins, not from the center, not from the establishment. They love to speak from the margins so that they can be critical of the establishment. Unfortunately, after cultural studies migrated to the United States, part of that has been lost, but still it is important. Then cultural studies scholars are not satisfied with the existing critical vocabularies and terms of reference and frames of understanding. They are trying to come up with newer vocabularies and frames of intelligibility. So that again gives them an opportunity to be involved in a quest for new territories, and that is quite central to their endeavor. So what we have is a discipline that is trying to balance between the cognitive and the affective. That's very unusual, because in most disciplines, both in the humanities and the social sciences, you focus on the cognitive. But here, cognitive is important, but at the same time, the affective is also important. By affective, what I mean is emotion or feelings, but not merely that. Feeling as it leads to knowledge. So it's not just feeling or emotion in isolation, but it is feeling or emotion as it paves the way to knowledge, to cognition. So that this is something distinctive about cultural studies, the combination of cognitive and the affective, that becomes important. So in order to understand the nature and significance of cultural studies, we have to have some sense of the models that exist at the present time. The most obvious model is a British model. Cultural studies was established in England in 1964 at the University of Birmingham at the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies. The first director was Richard Hogarth, and the first associate director was Stuart Hall. Now, what is very interesting is Richard Hogarth was a literary scholar who had an interest in sociology. Stuart Hall was a sociologist who had an interest in literature. So you have the coming together of the humanities and the social sciences at the Birmingham Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies. So that's one. But this school of thought migrated to America and a lot of changes happened. It lost its political edge, but it became far more abstract, and it began to involve itself in postmodernism, post-structuralism. And in a sense, it was marked by a retreat into theoretical elitism, so which is very unfortunate because the original founders of this project were down to earth, had very much practical issues in mind. So that becomes important. And of course, the most dominant model still is a British model. It was modified in America, in Canada, in Australia, and so on. But there were other models that were in existence. In the 1930s, in Japan, there were certain Marxist-oriented scholars who were trying to understand popular culture in Japan. That had a kind of cultural studies thrust to it. Or in Latin America, there's a debate, of course. Some say Latin American cultural studies was influenced by the British model, but others say, no, it's homegrown. They grew out of their own movements and their own concepts and so on. But still, you have the Latin American model. But still, the most important model is the British model. Another is that the African American and the Americans are, some scholars are trying to come up with a different set of understandings regarding cultural studies. So in order to understand the nature and significance of cultural studies, it's good to keep these models in mind. It is against this background, I would like to very briefly talk about the limitations, because if we are to know a discipline well, we must not only know its strengths, but also its limitations. In the case of cultural studies, I would like to identify a number of limitations. One is it's Eurocentric. Cultural studies is largely Eurocentric. If you see the scholars, they come out of Europe, and their methodologies, their themes of interest, their vision, it bears the imprint of European culture. So therefore, it's very important to change the Eurocentric focus. That's one. Another is that, as I said, the disjunction between theory and practice becomes alarmingly large. So we need to somehow bring them closer together, theory and practice, because the original founders were very keen to keep the connection between theory and practice close. So that becomes an important element. Then the interventionist model, again, we have to regain that interventionist impulse and make cultural studies a discipline that is one that offers resistance to mainstream thinking. At the same time, cultural studies has become very trivial because we are trying to deal with popular culture. It's very easy to slip into banality and triviality, and that has happened, which is unfortunate. So we got to be very careful that it doesn't become trivial. Then again, that it has become too capacious, so that it lacks a focus. So we have to be very careful about keeping a very distinct focus in mind. Then again, the pedagogical issue is very important. Cultural studies, after it migrated to the United States and other countries, became much more interested in the pedagogical aspect rather than the political aspect. But if there's a way of trying to combine the political and the pedagogical, then I think that will be of great significance. So that's something that's important. In other words, it is both a critical discourse and a political project. We have to keep both sides in mind. Then the idea of indigenousness, because so far we've been heavily influenced by European thought and European ideas and models. Is it possible for us to establish some links with indigenous modes of thinking and indigenous roots, indigenous sensibility? It's a matter worth considering, because that is one countervailing force to Eurocentrism. So the cultural studies was always seen as a counter discourse, speaking from the margins. But now, after it went to America, it has been established by communication departments, mainstream departments, so that it has become professionalized, it has become standardized, it has become institutionalized, and along with that, it has become commodified, which is very ironical, because one of the chief enemies of the early cultural studies scholars was commodification. But now commodification has become a friend and an ally, which of course goes against the whole thrust of cultural studies. So we have to be on our guard against these different changes. Now, against this background, very quickly, I want to refer to a few theories that you might want to keep in mind. One is Raymond Williams, who was my teacher at Cambridge, wonderful man, and he's done very important work in trying to show the connection between Marxism and culture, and how culture operates within the everyday life and social formation. So Raymond Williams and his book, Culture and Society, published in 1958, which is before the establishment of the Birmingham Cultural Center, is important. Second is Stuart Hall, who's a Jamaican by birth, and who was later to become the director of the Birmingham Center for Cultural Studies. And he expanded the scope of cultural studies by bringing in the French structuralist Marxist Louis Althusser and the Italian Marxist Gramsci. And he widened the discursive field of cultural studies by doing that. Then we have the American scholar Lawrence Grossberg, who has tried to engage modern postmodernist, post-cultural, post-structuralist theories in order to give a sharper focus to cultural studies. Then you have Walter Benjamin, the German cultural critic. He died in 1940, he committed suicide actually in 1940. But what he wrote in the 20s and the 30s are now being reinterpreted in modern light as very important work for cultural studies. So Walter Benjamin becomes important. Then Michel Foucault, I referred to earlier, with his ideas of power and so on, becomes central. And Pierre Bourdieu, is an analysis about class distinctions and taste and the production of culture. These are issues that modern scholars of cultural studies can pursue profitably. And finally, one more, Roland Barthes, especially in his book, Mythologies and Empire of Science, have much to offer to cultural studies scholars. So these are some of the theories. So it is against this background. Now, what our task is to make cultural studies relevant to us, make it our own field of inquiry. How can we do that? We should get away from the Eurocentricity. Two, we should recognize that coloniality is the untranscendable horizon of analysis. In other words, we cannot get away from colonialism. The theories that I've spoken about so far did not engage colonialism. It is up to us to engage with colonialism and make it a very important reference point in the study of culture. So cultural studies and post-colonial theory has to come together in very significant ways. Another is we cannot bodily lift the Western culture theories and study our schools and universities, because there's a change that needs to be made. We need to come up with a new discursive terrain. Let me give one example. Martin Krumasinger has written extensively, both in Sinhala and English, on culture. Now, for instance, when he says Gami Sanskrutya, he is using that both as a descriptive and a prescriptive term. It carries certain normative values. It carries certain valorizations. For him, Gami Sanskrutya is pure. It is flexible. It is humane. And it is accommodating. All these important values are preserved in the term Gami Sanskrutya. But if you take the word culture in the Western concept, it is seen as a site of struggle. It is a conflictual concept where struggle for meaning is taking place incessantly. Culture is a site where the meanings are made, unmade, and remade. So it's a very different concept from Martin Wickramasinghe's, and how do we square the two? So these are some important issues that we need to keep in mind. So For us, I think at this point, we might draw on the Indian experience. Now, there are a number of Indian scholars whose work can be brought into the study of cultural studies. They would be the first to say what they're doing is not cultural studies. But I would argue that what they are doing is of great value to us as scholars interested in cultural studies. I have names of people like Gayatri Spivak, Homi Baba, Ashish Nandi, Arjuna Padure, Deepesh Chakravarti, Partha Chatterjee, and Veena Das. I know most of them, and I work closely with them, and I know their strengths and how they can contribute significantly. For instance, Homi Baba and Gayatri Spivak have done excellent work on post-colonial theory. They are not awfully fond of cultural studies, but they have done excellent work on post-colonial theory, and that can be brought into our analysis. Similarly, Ashish Nandi has done wonderful work on the study of nationhood, reason, and rationality, science, nationalism, and modernity. And these have great value for us as students of cultural studies. Veena Das, for instance, is a sociologist, but at the same time, she draws on the work of ordinary language philosophers like Wittgenstein and Stanley Cavell. And in addition, I know this for a fact, she is a great Sanskrit scholar, and she draws on the Sanskrit philosophers of language. So she comes up with something that is both Eastern and Western, and that is an ideal that I would very much like to propagate. So the combination of the East and the West that you find in Veena Das is something that we in Sri Lanka can draw inspiration from. So the Indian experience is important. It is against this background, I want to suggest a few themes that you might pursue. One is something from the humanities side. Let's take the Vesantara story. It's very popular in Sri Lanka. It is in the Butsarana. It's a chapter in the Butsarana. It is a popular folk poem. There's a play by John De Silva on this story. Sarachandra wrote a classical play on the Vesantara. There was a popular film made on the Vesantara. In popular songs, there are many popular songs dealing with the Vesantara story. So what you find is, you find the same unitary story being expressed, receiving articulation in different genres and different cultural contexts. So that's a wonderful topic for a cultural studies scholar. Or let's take something from the social science. Let's take the relationship between secularity and religiosity in Sri Lanka. We normally tend to think of these in opposing terms, which is true so far as it goes. But you also have to bear in mind the fact, as Talal Lasad and so on have pointed out, secularism grows out of religion, and religion grows out of secularity. There's a very complex interplay, and that's wonderful territory for cultural studies scholars. Or let's take another example, rituals. Some of our most eminent anthropologists have worked on rituals, and they have done so within the context of cultural anthropology. But we can widen that into performance theory and bring ritual into our analysis in many interesting ways. Or let's take one more example, nationalism and vigilance, right? Nationalism and vigilance are very closely connected. When you say nationhood, Benedict Anderson says it's an imaginary community. Ernest Gellner says it grows in industrial societies. Tony Giddens says that it's a product of modernity. Homi Baba says nations are narrated into existence. And here comes our own writer, Gurudas Amarsekara, and he has been severely criticized for this, saying that nationhood can be understood as a civilizational concept. So there are different ways of seeing the nation, and how can we study nation and the relationship to violence. One more, and it's a kind of contemporary topic. Most of you have heard the sensational song, Manike Mage Hite. Now, that became a sensation. It became very popular in England, in China, in India, Middle East, and so on. It's a Sinhala rap song. But to understand the cultural discourse behind it, you have to understand the rap music in the 1930s in New York and how it migrated to England. And it became mixed up with the dance music of Punjab called Bhangra. And Bhangra gave it a new twist, and it became a site of resistance and so on. So there's an Asian connection coming into it. And here in this song, what you find is the rhythms of rap music being in collision with the Sinhala language. So something very interesting is happening about cultural globalization and commodification and so on. So that's again an interesting topic. So these are some of the topics that I have many more actually in mind, but because my time is up, I have to stop. But these are some interesting topics that one can pursue in terms of our own interests and investments. So once again, let me go back to what I was trying to say. My point is, humanities and social sciences are normally seen as antagonists, antithetical, but they can also be friends and allies, and they can be involved in a common quest for knowledge. And that has happened in the case of cultural studies. And therefore, I think it's very good for us as we celebrate the establishment of humanities and social sciences at the university level to think of the importance of cultural studies. Thank you very much.
බෙහෙවින්ම ස්තුතියි මේ මොහොතේදී සජීවීව සම්බන්ධ වුණු සම්මානිත මහාචාර්ය විමල් දිසානායකයන්ට එතුමන් ලාංකේය සාහිත්‍ය කලා අධ්‍යයන ශේෂ්ත්‍රවලට පමණක් නොව සංවේදන ශේෂ්ත්‍රයටත් මම හිතන්නේ මහත් දායකත්වයක් දැක්වූ ප්‍රමුඛ පෙළ විද්වතෙක් දිනේදී මම හිතන්නේ අපට ඉතාම සුවිශේෂී අවස්ථාවක් එතුමා මේ සභාව ආමන්ත්‍රණය කිරීම. එසේනම් අද දින මේ සමාරම්භක උළෙලෙහි කටයුතු සමාප්ත කරන්න අප සූදානම් වන්නේ ඒ සඳහා සපමිනි ඔබ සැම වෙනුවෙන් තුති පුදන්නට අප ගෞරවයෙන් ඇරයුම් කරනවා විශ්වවිද්‍යාල ප්‍රතිපාදන කොමිෂන් සභාවෙහි උපසභාපති ජේෂ්ඨ මහාචාර්ය චන්දනුඩවත්ත මහතාට.
நாம் இன்றைய நிகழ்வின் இறுதிக்கட்டத்தை நோக்கி வந்துள்ளோம். அந்த வகையில் உத்தியோகபூர்வமாக இதனை நிறைவு செய்ய முன்னர் நன்றியுரையை வழங்குமாறு இலங்கை பல்கலைக்கழக மானியங்கள் ஆணைக்குழுவின் துணைத் தலைவரான சிரேஷ்ட பேராசிரியர் சந்தன உடவத்தை அவர்களை அழைக்கிறோம்.
Thank you very much, Emeritus Professor Vimal Disanayake, for that thought-provoking keynote address about how to bridge social sciences and humanities through cultural studies. We have now come towards the end of this inaugural session. And before we conclude the session, my invitation goes out to the Vice Chairman of the University Grants Commission Sri Lanka, Senior Professor Chandan Udavatta, to give away the word of thanks.
Very good evening, very good morning to everybody. The UGC chairman of the UGC, Professor Sampath Amaratunga, and Professor Premakumar De Silva, and the UGC, he's a commission member, and also the other members of the commission, and respectable the vice chancellors and the deans of the social sciences and languages in the country, the faculties. Professor Vimal Disanayake was the keynote speaker today. The members of the Standing Committee of Social Sciences and Humanities, and our most valid invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege to have been asked to propose the vote of thanks on the occasion in order to appreciate the people behind the scene to make this event very great success, and also the historical one in the state universities in Sri Lanka. ප්‍රථමයෙන්ම මම අති ගෞරවනීය නායක ඉත්තාපෑනු දමලක ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේටත් ඒ වගේම අනුනායක කොටපිටියේ රාහුල ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ ඇතුළු ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේලාට සියලුම ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේලාට මෙතන වැඩම කිරීම සම්බන්ධව අපගේ ගෞරවනීය ස්තුතිය පිරිනමන්න කැමැතියි. And first and foremost, we wish to reiterate to His Excellency the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa on our deep gratitude for his distinguished contribution to promoting the field of humanities and social sciences in favor of sustainable development of the country. He has sent a message to us. It is in your booklet. And I thank you, sir, for your encouraging words. The next, the Honorable Prime Minister, His Excellency the Mahinda Rajapaksa, is also highly acknowledged for this great support extended to us in order to get this celebration a success. And also thanks for his very valuable thoughts and encouraging word in your message to us. Thank you very much, sir. Then I must mention our deep sense of gratitude to Honorable Minister of Education, Dinesh Gunawardena, for accepting our invitation to be with us today morning. And it is honoring us with your presence here, sir, as a chief guest. So on behalf of all of us, I express my gratitude and also my thanks to you, sir, for spending your very valuable time with us. Even though Professor Kapila Pereira is the Secretary to the Ministry of Education, he is unable to participate in physically today. However, we had many work together with the Secretary to make this our program success. I would like to thank sir in this regard. Even though you are not present today, I take this opportunity to thank you. And further, we are very grateful to the chairman of UGC, Senior Professor Sampath Amaratunga, who was fully and happily gave his support to make this event at a grand scale. And he was allocating his very valuable time to share his views to improve every step during this process. Thank you, sir. Well, ladies and gentlemen, an event like this cannot happen overnight. The wheels started to rolling several months ago. It required planning and bird eye for details. We have been very fortunate enough to get backed by a team which was very motivated and dedicated colleagues led by Professor Premakumar D. Silva. Professor Premakumar D. Silva is one of commission member and also the acting director of InCash, and also the chairman of the Standing Committee on Humanity and Social Sciences. And you made this event a very achievable one. The single event is a sample of your success in your career. It is not an easy task, but you made it easy by your experience and courage. Thank you, my dear Senior Professor Prema Kumari De Silva. Our keynote speaker, Professor Vimal Disanayaka. So he's, as we all know, he's a very well-known academic. He's one of leading well-known author or scholar. His field of interest was Asian cinemas and Asian communication theory. But he published as the citation read by Professor Oji Dayaratna. He has published a large number of scholarly articles, books, and cinemas. And we are very fortunate, sir, to listen to you today morning. So thank you very much for your very inspiring talk. And we have well taken your ideas, and especially in terms of social science and humanity studies. So great. So thank you very much for accepting our invitation and also to the keynote address from online. I hope that you are not in the mid of the night, but somewhere in 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in USA. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor, for accepting your invitation. And next, I would like to thank the members of the commission. So some members I present here. And thank you very much, your presence here, and also your very encouragement, support during the commission meeting you have extended to, especially to Professor Prema Kumar. And all VCs, I see several VCs are here. And thank you very much, dear sirs and madam, for accepting our invitation and your presence here. Some VCs has come from quite far away in spite of this pandemic situation. And also I would like to thank all the VCs, because I came to know that all the VCs has already given very fullest cooperation to their respective deans of the faculties, of especially the art faculties or humanities faculties. Thank you very much, sir and madam. Your presence is also here, so very encouraging, and thank you very much. And our secretary, Dr. Priyantha Premakumara, and also our accountant, Mr. Ubeyokula Ranavira, and some additional secretaries in the UGC, as well as the deans of the faculties of arts and humanities and social sciences, and also deans and other members of the faculties in the university system is very acknowledged, and very thank you very much for your support extended to success in this event. I take this opportunity to thank all authors who have contributed to their knowledge, for bringing up the historical volume. So just a couple of minutes ago, we received it, and also the survey report and the conference proceeding. Further, I must not forget to share my gratitude to the editors who made these books into fantastic outputs by their hard work. I congratulate and thank them for their valuable effect for this regard. So I must thank the coordinators of this event, Dr. Asha Fernando from Jawaharlal University, and also Professor Vimal Devagamane from Colombo University, who spent their very valuable time even during this dangerous pandemic situation to make this event a very successful one. So I should thank the following administrative staff of the UGC. So Mr. Rasika Karunaratna, Mrs. Janadari Vijay Singh, Ms. Chamini Gunavardhana, and Mrs. Mahipa Senadira, and Mr. Samantha Vikramarachi, and Mrs. B.K. Sagarika, and all the other academic administrative staff and the financial officers at the UGC for your valuable support in order to success of this particular event, especially the staff of the Academic Affairs Division at the UGC is for arranging the logistic support and guidance they have extended to us, all of us, for this successful, in order to get the successful event. Our friends in mass media have been extremely helpful to us. We are grateful to them and their respective organizations as well for passing this our message to every nook and corner of the country. So thank you very much, the ladies and gentlemen who are in the media, for your kind cooperation. On this historic occasion, I would like to extend my warm and sincere gratitude to the organizing committee for their committed effort to make this event a success. So on behalf of the UGC and the organizing committee, I would like to extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all the speakers. So I just came to know that about around 28 speakers are there tomorrow, for gracing our important work and also so sharing your valuable thoughts and knowledge with us today and tomorrow. I thank each and every one whom I missed. I should not do that, but sometime I may also, it could happen. I missed to mention their names. So without all of you, even a small thing might not have moved. Thank you very much for all those who have supported to us. The last but not least, you, the ladies and gentlemen, we express our very grateful thanks for having presence here today, especially everybody in this occasion, and it's coming from far away from the countries. So I just came to know that even there are 80 plus participants are online also. So thank you very much for your presence here, and also those who joined online. So without you, we cannot think about the success of this event. So it's very difficult to, this is the, I think, difficult talk in the ceremony to make, vote of thanks would be the most difficult speech in a ceremony. So I have to be very, very careful to thanks when you are thanking people. So anyway, I think I have done it in my understanding. So thank you very much again and again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your presence here today. Thank you.
බෙහෙවින් ස්තුතියි ජේෂ්ඨ මහාචාර්යතුමනි. එසේනම් අද දවසේදී මේ සමාරම්භක සැසියෙහි කටයුතු සමාප්ත කරන්න ඔබ සූදානම් වන්නේ. හරි. හොඳයි. කරුණු කීපයක් දැනුම් දෙන්න තිබෙනවා අපිට නිවේදන වශයෙන්. එකක් තමයි මේ කටයුතු සඳහා සහභාගී වූ ඔබ සියලු දෙනාටම ස්තුතිය කලින් පළ කරා. ඒ අතරවාරයේදී ඔබ සියලු දෙනාටම මම හිතන්නේ මේ කමිටුවල සියලු දෙනාටම සමූහ ඡායාරූපයකට පෙනී සිටීමට ඉදිරියට පැමිණෙන ලෙස සංවිධායක මණ්ඩලය දන්වා සිටිනවා. දැන් ඒ දැනුම් දීමත් සමගම තවත් දැනුම් දීමක් තිබෙනවා. අද දින කටයුතු මෙලෙස අවසන් වුවත් හෙට දිනේදී මම හිතන්නේ පරිශ්‍රණ සැසියක් පැවැත්වෙනවා. ඒ සම්බන්ධ තොරතුරු සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඔබ දැනුවත්ව ඇති. සංවිධායක මණ්ඩලය ගැන ඔබ දැනුවත් කර ඇති කියලා විශ්වාස කරනවා. ඒ වගේම තවදුරටත් තොරතුරු කොට දැනගන්න පුළුවන්. මේ පරිශ්‍රයේ ගැවසෙන ඔබ සංවිධායක මණ්ඩලයේ සියලු දෙනා අතුරින්. ඒ වගේම අද දින දිවා ආහාරයක් සූදානම්ව තිබෙනවා. මේ සම්මන්ත්‍රණ ශාලාවට අනුබද්ධිත උත්සව ශාලාවෙහි ඒ බවත් ඔබට දන්වා සිටිනවා. එසේනම් අද මෙම උළෙල නිවේදනය කරන්නට මා සමග එකතු වුණේ විවෘත විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයේ දිලානි, ඒ වගේම කොළඹ විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයේ අනුරාධා. ඉතින් තවත් මෙවැනිම සුවිශේෂී දිනයක, ඓතිහාසික දිනයක, ඒ වගේම ලාංකේය උසස් අධ්‍යාපනය සම්බන්ධ තවත් සුවිශේෂී කටයුත්තකින් හමු වනතුරු අප ඔබෙන් සමුගන්නවා. ජාතික ගීය සඳහා නැගී සිටින්න සූදානම් වන්න.
இலங்கையின் சமூக விஞ்ஞானங்கள் மற்றும் மானிடவியல் கல்வி நூற்றாண்டு விழாவின் இத்துடன் நிறைவு செய்கின்றோம். புத்துணர்ச்சி மற்றும் கூட்டுறவுக்காக எங்களுடன் இணைவதற்கு அழைக்கும் அதே வேளையில் இன்றைய நிகழ்ச்சியை நிறைவு செய்யும் முகமாக தேசிய கீதத்துடன் இணைந்து கொள்வோம். நன்றி.
With this, we conclude the inauguration ceremony of the centenary year celebration of humanities and social sciences in higher education in Sri Lanka. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank my fellow co-host Osanda Gunaratna from University of Colombo and Dilani from the Open University, Sri Lanka. And we would also like to remind you, please join with us for the conference tomorrow, and I'm sure the organizing committee has shared the relevant particular details with you. And another small announcement for the organizing committee, following the conclusion of the ceremony, please join us for a group photograph. With this, while we invite you to join with us for refreshment, lunch, and fellowship at the banquet hall, please rise for the national anthem.